Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. Secretary Mnuchin, welcome. We heard your testimony before the Finance Committee that the President's tax reform plan would be paid for, I quote you here, with economic growth and base broadening. On the same day, OMB Director Mulvaney said that the President's tax reform plan would be deficit neutral without regard to growth. Which one of you is accurate? Which will be the plan?
So first, let me say that we're hard working on tax reform. Although we did put out a very short overview, the devil's in the details, and we hope that that's something that we can release soon.
Yeah, but that's not responsive to my question.
I understand that. When the budget was done, we didn't have tax reform done. So Mulvaney didn't have tax reform to put into the budget, okay? Now, there's lots of different
But you will
issues.
agree with me that whether dynamic scoring is a figment of the Republican imagination or whether it's real, you can't count it twice.
We have no intention of counting it twice. So
Okay,
as I've
good.
said before, I can assure you that when we come out with
We
tax
agree
reform,
on that. It cannot be counted twice. Not once in tax
absolutely.
reform and another time
The
for
budget will be updated with updated projections, and there is no intent, and obviously we understand math, there'll be no double counting. I didn't think that dynamic scoring was something that was completely along a Republican and Democrat line. There's plenty of
Pretty close.
There's plenty of Democrat economists that support it.
Pretty close, particularly in its unconstrained version. With respect to concern about the deficit, most of the witnesses, if not all of the witnesses that have come before this committee, have recognized that spending through the tax code that reduces revenues and gives benefits to either individuals or corporations has just as direct an effect on the deficit as appropriated spending. And the tax spending and appropriated spending are, from a deficit point of view, the same thing. Do you agree with that?
Well, let me just first say, we're very concerned about the deficit. We're concerned about the debt having gone from 10 trillion to 20 trillion. And yes, we need to make sure that if we have tax reform, which is not just tax cuts, but tax reform, that it's paid for and accounted for.
And if we're looking at trying to bring the deficit down, it would be important to close, let's say it would be valuable with regard to deficit reduction to close loopholes, and indeed it would be just as valuable on a dollar basis as the same dollar value of appropriated spending cuts.
Well, again, it depends on what the impact is. The tax code and the changes we're trying to make to the tax code are all about creating economic growth that will create more revenues and will cut government spending on various entitlement programs.
One of the issues that we are going to face, I hope sooner or later, in this committee is the issue of savings in the healthcare system. As you probably know, the American healthcare system is more expensive than virtually all of our OECD competitors by a lot, like twice what the average is. Mm-hmm. And we don't do particularly well on some of the basic measures of health that you think that much spending would pay for. So I look forward to working with you on that. One of the things we've seen is CBO reduced the out-year projections for federal health care spending downwards by $3.3 trillion since the Affordable Care Act. So I would urge you to keep an eye on that and not let those savings go to waste in the pursuit of the Affordable Care Act. And in the matter of that, it appears that the Affordable Care Act is being repealed through a secret process in which there will be no opportunity for Democratic amendments, Mr. Chairman. And there was so much criticism from the Republican side about the one moment when we used reconciliation for a last piece of the bill, but the bulk of the bill was done through our HELP committee, as you remember. And you yourself, Mr. Chairman, got more than 50, I think 50 amendments in that process, or at least had your name on 50 amendments. We put 160 through that 160 Republican amendments passed in the Help Committee, as I recall. We had days of hearings. We had amendment after amendment after amendment after amendment. The one that created the imaginary death panel thing was actually an amendment by Johnny Isaacson, which I think was number 157 of the amendments that we took up in that committee. So I think we're turning the Senate into something very unfortunate if 0 amendments are going to be allowed other than through the vote-a-rama process. And for those of you on the Republican side who actually had amendments during that process, I think it's really double dealing, and I hope we don't go that path. Thank you, Chairman.